What if civilization is the experiment and we are the lab rats? Somewhere right now, a scientist is running an experiment on the most complex society ever built. She's measuring how it responds to abundance, to overpopulation, to the slow disappearance of meaningful work. She's been running this experiment for about 10,000 years. The subjects have no idea they're in it. You're one of them. And before you dismiss that as a metaphor, understand this. The experiment has already been run, on a smaller scale, in a controlled environment with measurable results. The data exists. The conclusions were published, and they are far more disturbing than anyone who cites this study ever lets on. In 1968, an American behavioral researcher named John Calhoun built what he called a universe for mice. Not a cage, a universe. Unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect temperature, soft nesting material in every corner. No predators, no disease, no competition for resources of any kind. He placed 8 mice inside and shut the lid. He called it Universe 25. It was the 25th version of the same experiment. The previous 24 had all ended the same way. Every single one. For the first 100 days, almost nothing happened. The mice explored. They mapped the space. They sorted out who slept where. Then the first litters arrived, and the population began to double every 55 days. By day 300, there were over 600 animals living inside. They climbed over each other on the ramps. They slept in piles. They jostled for nesting space at the tops of the apartments. And this is the moment Calhoun had been waiting for his entire career. Because this is the moment everything began to come apart. In a normal mouse colony, when the population outgrows its territory, something simple happens. The surplus mice leave. They find new ground. They build new lives somewhere else. That is what the species is wired to do. Inside Universe 25, there was no somewhere else. There was no frontier. There was nowhere to go. The walls were the edge of the world. And what Calhoun watched happen next, he spent the rest of his life trying to explain in terms that go far beyond mice. The young males, the ones with no territory to claim and no role to fill, drifted into the center of the enclosure. They formed listless pools of bodies. They had no fights to win, no females to court, no nests to defend. They were healthy, well-fed, and they had absolutely nothing to do. And here is the part nobody talks about. When one of these males was attacked by another mouse, he would not fight back. He would absorb the damage, stand up, walk a few feet, and lie down again, as if the violence no longer registered as something worth responding to, as if there was nothing left inside him that remembered what he was supposed to be defending. At the same time, a second group emerged on the opposite end of the spectrum, frantic, indiscriminate, chaotic. They forced themselves into nests other males were actively defending. They skipped courtship entirely. They refused to be deterred by aggression from dominant males. They moved through the enclosure faster than any other mice, burning through every social norm the colony had ever operated by. And in the worst pockets, behaviors appeared that no functioning mouse society had ever produced before. The females retreated. The ones who could not find a stable place in the social order climbed to the highest apartments and lived alone. They stopped interacting with males. They stopped reproducing. The mothers who were still trying to raise pups began to fail in a much darker way. The males who had originally held territory grew exhausted from constant defense and eventually stopped protecting their families altogether. The mothers had to defend the nest themselves while still nursing. They turned on their own young. Some forgot which pups belonged to them. Others stopped recognizing them as theirs at all. In some sections of the colony, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived to weaning. And then came the generation that Calhoun would never forget. The mice born into this world. The ones who had never known anything else. They never fought. They never tried to mate. They never engaged in any social behavior at all. They ate. They slept. They groomed themselves obsessively. Their fur stayed perfect because they never got into a single conflict. They moved through the colony as if no other mouse existed in it. Calhoun named them the beautiful ones. They looked like the healthiest specimens in the entire enclosure. They were also, in every way that mattered, already extinct. They had simply opted out of the species, not because they were sick, not because they were broken, because the world they were born into had no place for them to be anything else. On day 560, the population peaked at 2,200 mice. It would never go higher. The last successful conception happened on day 920. After that, no new mice were born. The beautiful ones kept grooming themselves. The isolated females stayed in their high apartments. Violence continued in pockets with no real purpose left to it. And one by one, the mice died of old age with no replacements coming up behind them. The last mouse in Universe 25 died on May 23, 1973. 4 years and 10 months after Calhoun shut the lid. He wrote that the mice had died 2 deaths. The first was the death of the spirit. The second was the death of the body. The first one happened years before the second. Now, here is what the world did with this information. They took the obvious reading. Comfort kills. Abundance destroys. A life without struggle collapses on itself. The image of the beautiful ones became one of the most cited metaphors of the late 20th century. Politicians used it. Religious leaders used it. Urbanists, philosophers, sociologists. Anyone who wanted to warn about the decay of modern life found something in those mice they could use. But that reading is not what Calhoun actually said. His real conclusion was sitting in the paper in his own words, and almost nobody quoted it in full. He wrote that for a species as complex as a human being, a similar collapse was not just possible, it was logical. If the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available, only disruption can follow. The killer was not comfort. The killer was the disappearance of meaningful roles. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. The space never ran out. What ran out was the thing nobody thought to measure when they built the paradise: the supply of reasons to participate. Now ask yourself a different kind of question. What is civilization, structurally, if not exactly this? A controlled environment engineered to remove the basic pressures of survival. We built agriculture so we wouldn't have to hunt. We built medicine so we wouldn't die from infections that killed our great-grandparents. We built automation so we wouldn't have to perform physical labor. We built entertainment so we would never have to sit with silence. We built delivery systems so we would never go hungry, never wait, never feel the friction of needing something we couldn't immediately have. We have been for 10,000 years constructing a paradise, and we have been so focused on solving scarcity that we never once stopped to ask what happens when we actually succeed. Look at what is already visible in the data. In the wealthiest, most comfortable societies on Earth, birth rates are collapsing. Japan, South Korea, Germany, Italy. The countries that have most successfully eliminated material hardship are the same countries watching their populations age and shrink with no replacement coming. The beautiful ones are already here. They are educated, physically healthy, economically stable, and have quietly opted out of reproduction. Not because resources are scarce, because something else has disappeared. Something that was never written into the design of the paradise because nobody thought it needed to be. Look at the male behavioral split Calhoun documented. The listless ones who absorb damage without fighting back, and the frantic, indiscriminate ones who burn through every social norm with no clear goal. Does that remind you of anything? One group retreating into passivity, into screens, into a life carefully engineered to require absolutely nothing from them. Another group driven to chaos, to provocation, to escalation that serves no coherent purpose. Both responses to the same underlying condition. No frontier, no role, nowhere to go. The walls are still the edge of the world. Look at what has happened to meaning itself. In 2019, a Gallup study found that 85% of workers worldwide reported feeling disengaged from their jobs. Not overworked, not underpaid, disengaged, disconnected from any sense that what they were doing mattered to anyone, including themselves. This is not a productivity problem. This is not a management failure. This is a species running out of the one resource the experiment was never designed to replenish. We built a civilization so efficient that it no longer needs most of the people living inside it to do anything essential. And a species that is not needed is a species already dying its first death. Calhoun was not a doomer. He spent the last decades of his life not predicting collapse, but trying to prevent it. He kept building new universes. He kept changing the variables. He was looking for the single thing he could put back into a paradise that would let it keep working. He believed the answer existed. He wrote that as physical space contracts, the only way forward is to expand into conceptual space, into ideas, into the work of creating roles that did not exist before. He called it ideational generativity, a long phrase for a simple and terrifying idea. The only way out of the experiment is to keep inventing new reasons to be here, to manufacture meaning faster than the paradise can dissolve it. But here's the thing about experiments. They have a design, they have a purpose, they have someone watching through the glass and taking notes. And the assumption wired into every civilization humanity has ever built is that we are the ones running the experiment, that we are the scientists, not the subjects, that we are shaping the conditions, not being shaped by them. Calhoun's data says something different. It says that once you build the container starts running the experiment on you. The most disturbing reading of Universe 25 is not that the mice failed, it is that they did exactly what the design produced. They responded rationally to irrational conditions. They optimized perfectly for a world that had no room for them to be anything more than what they became. We built the most sophisticated container in the history of life on this planet. We are sitting inside it right now, grooming our fur, watching our numbers, wondering in the quiet hours why nothing feels like it quite matters the way it should. The mice didn't have a choice about the world they were born into. They couldn't read Calhoun's notes. They couldn't see the enclosure from the outside. They had no way of knowing that the paradise was the problem. We do. The question is whether knowing changes anything at all, or whether we are already too deep inside the experiment to remember there was ever anything else.